are seeing us live on Facebook. My name is Jen Gillick, and I am the Program Director at the Northwest Chapter of American Parkinson Disease Association. I'm very pleased that you have joined us once again for day 2 of our very special program on maximizing your gut health. So I hope you had a wonderful evening. I had a great evening. The sun came out here. I took a lovely walk, socially distanced with a friend, with a mask on. You know, but it was really great because I hadn't actually socialized with anybody but my husband in quite a while. So that was nice. So thanks everybody for coming back. Folks from Coeur d'Alene are here. We are going to get started, I think. So for those of you who joined us yesterday, I hope you enjoyed the program. I certainly learned a lot about my gut biome, and it certainly gave me a lot to think about and further look into. That presentation and the one today will be posted on the APDA Northwest YouTube channel, and that'll be up early next week. Or you can find it on Facebook immediately as we are broadcasting live. So today's program will build upon the learnings and science about the gut biome and give you some practical tips to improve your own personal gut health. Before I introduce our speaker, I would like to again thank our sponsors for this program, Boston Scientific and Kiowa Kirin. Both of them have financially supported APDA, and their support really helps us deliver on our mission to provide the support, education, and research that will help everyone impacted by Parkinson's disease live life to the fullest. So Wilma Shaw, our presenter today, is a nutritional therapy practitioner and is board certified in holistic nutrition. I met Wilma a couple of years ago when I participated in a program that she runs called Restart, because I was interested in sort of healing my own gut and focusing on my own gut health. I found her to be very knowledgeable and approachable, and I liked her presentation style. And so when I was looking for someone to talk about Parkinson's and nutrition, I asked if she'd be interested and if that'd be a good fit for her. And at the time she said, you know, Parkinson's wasn't really her specialty, but that she would do some more research and learn more. And so now here we are a couple years later, and she has spoken on this topic several times, and she's one of my go-tos when I'm looking for someone knowledgeable in speaking about nutrition and Parkinson's disease. So thank you for being here and talking about the healing power of food. We will do question and answer after your presentation. So if you have questions at any time during this program, feel free to enter that into the question and answer box, which should be located at the bottom of your Zoom screen for those of you who are attending. And you can also type into the chat because we're monitoring that. We had a few technical difficulties yesterday, so if something is going wrong from the way that you're seeing it, please type it into the chat and we'll see if we can solve it. So hopefully nothing will go wrong today, but if it does, we'll deal with it. It's cool. So thank you, Wilma. I am gonna exit the screen and I'm gonna turn it all over to you. Thanks for being here.
All right, thanks, Jen. Hello, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I think for sure Jen jinxed it when she said nothing will go wrong today, but who knows, we will deal. So this is a conversation today about the healing power of food, focused on a chronic illness or dis-ease like Parkinson's and the importance of gut health. So Jen said a little bit about who I am, but I'd like to say a little more. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, but what that means is I work with clients to improve their health through diet, nutrient supplementation, and lifestyle. So just to be clear, I do not diagnose or treat. I leave that to the medical professionals like Kelly Condifer that spoke yesterday. So my passion really is in helping those that, well, that like me, at one point or another was kind of stopped taking seriously. That's how I got into this. You know, I had my own medical issues, and doctors weren't really helping me figure out how to get better. And I started doing research on that and ended up going to nutrition school for that reason, and apply it to myself and then to teach others. So we all want to age gracefully, right? And in order to do that, we need to support our foundations, and the gut is one of those foundations. But I'm going to talk about a little more than just gut. So we are going to think about what Hippocrates said. He said, "Let food be thy medicine," right? This was 500 BC. We knew that then. We want to eat well and be well. So I love this quote: "Just as food causes chronic disease, it can be the most powerful cure." Think about that. And I believe Dr. Condifer said this, that all disease starts in the gut. That's a very popular quote, and true. So this slide, what I want to share is that it's about getting back to basics, okay? We want to nourish so we can flourish. And what you eat and how you eat plays a very important role in the health of your gut and your brain. And that's what Dr. Condifer spent a lot of time on, was how the gut has that second brain and all of the microbiome and the bidirectional communication between our gut. And I don't know if it's going to come across in reverse, I think, but this book is called The Second Brain. And if you want to just read more on your own, it's an excellent book. It's about basically how your gut has a mind of its own. So a healthy gut is truly foundational to a healthy brain. So I'd like to take you just back a little bit and think about, what was a healthy human diet, right? It was nutrient dense. That's the first thing. It was nutrient dense. So foods were seasonal, locally sourced, and minimally processed. There was very basic food processing techniques available, like soaking, sprouting, grinding, that increase the density and availability of the nutrients. And societies were, this was in the 30s, Dr. Weston Price traveled around the world and was looking at very healthy communities. And what he found is that they were omnivorous, meaning they relied heavily on plant food, but they did eat meat. And sometimes that meat was only bugs, but they were eating some animal protein. And he just really found that this was the diet that associated with the healthiest individuals, the healthiest communities. So now let's take a brief look at our food supply over time. So 12,000 years ago was the agricultural revolution. So this is where we went from hunter-gatherer to cultivator. So what did that do? Well, that brought us in to closer spaces because we weren't traveling as much, and started this decrease in variety of foods available because we started planting the same things in areas and hunting the same things that were available in the communities that we now lived. So the next thing that I find fascinating is refined sugar. So refined sugar 400 years ago, I hope you can see the picture a little bit, but they're cones of this hard sugar. Didn't come in a bag, right? You couldn't just pour it out. There were utensils, these tools that were kind of hard to use to be able to get the sugar out and utilize it in cooking. So it wasn't very popular, and really the wealthy were the ones that were even adding sugar to their cooking, to their food. And that was only 400 years ago. So the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago, think about people now moving in closer to where factories are, closer to cities, more urban. And again, we started seeing a decrease in the variety of foods and in the nutrient availability of foods, because now we're starting to process them and put them in jars and cans. And again, moving into the city. So now you don't have the farmers taking care of communities, you have people within the city sending food out. So the next one is food giants. And 100 years ago or so, when we started looking at boxed and shelf-stable food. I mean, this was a big break, right, in the ease of obtaining food that's already ready to go, pour out of a box and make. But again, we started seeing even less nutritional quality of that food and availability. It still wasn't extremely shelf stable, so it didn't last a long time on the shelf. So the next one, World War II, also known as like the chemical revolution, partly because we used the nitrogen, the leftover bombs had nitrogen in them, and we used them for fertilizer. And we sprayed it on our crops along with a whole bunch of other herbicides and pesticides. And so this is where we really started introducing more toxins, not just the processing, but the toxins into our food system. And I know Dr. Kelly Condifer spoke a lot about glyphosate, and that is a serious issue, similar to, you know, Agent Orange from this time. And yeah, so we're going to talk about how that affects the gut as well, the toxins, and why, if we can go organic with most things, it is better for us. The other thing that happened during the chemical revolution was, and because of the war, is we had to figure out now how to stabilize these foods for a much longer period of time. And that's where the hydrogenated fats came in. They couldn't ship butter, right? So they came up with margarine, because margarine is shelf stable. So it doesn't turn to liquid and it doesn't get rancid sitting on the shelf, right? But what we then find out later is that it's a toxic fat. But this is where it was developed, so it would be shelf stable. One thing I find really interesting, if any of you have heard of MREs that the military uses, they're meals ready to eat. These meals last 20 years on a shelf. Now, do they have a place? Yes, they do. When you need it, they're full of calories and they're full of chemicals, but they will keep you going. So where does that leave us? Right? Where does that leave us now? This is the standard American diet. So you've heard SAD, you've heard it called SAD, which is appropriate. The standard American diet is really, it's fast food. There's a lot of processing involved. I mean, anytime actually that you have something in a box, a bag, a can, right? It's processed. So it's a matter of minimally processing, because we all need those conveniences. There's a lot of toxins and pesticides, like we were saying. Added sugars, just about in everything that you're going to find in a box or a can is some form of added sugar. And fortunately now the FDA has changed the label requirements, so people have to show on their product whether the sugar is added or not. So you no longer are worrying, is it just coming from what's in the food, or is it additional? Food packaging. So there's like the BPA and the plastics and just all the chemicals and toxicity that we're getting through the food packaging. And there's been a lot of changes in that over time. Antibiotics, you talked about that yesterday. Yeah, we are a lot smarter with antibiotics now, but those of us can think back, you know, and it's like, oh, you have a runny nose, here's an antibiotic just in case, don't use it if you don't need to. We're a lot smarter because now we know that all those bacteria that are in our gut are actually very, very useful and helpful. So we don't want to necessarily kill them off. And then steroids, a lot for inflammation, for a lot of chronic diseases, and fake fats, like I was just talking about with the margarine. And the thing that really gets me is that this food, like a lot of the food you're seeing in this picture, is engineered to be craved, literally engineered by engineers in the food industry that are figuring out how much salt, fat, and sugar to put in something, how much coloring, how much flavoring do we add so that somebody wants to keep eating but not get repulsed by it. So get you just to that line where you can't stop. So when Frito-Lay, I think it was way back when, you know, said you can't have just one, or Lay's potato chips, right? You can't have just one. That was intentional, very intentional, and it's true. And then what I saw recently, I was in, not that recently now, end of last year at an airport, Starbucks had like craveability for some of their lattes, and this is being treated as a positive thing. And I just shook my head. But yeah, so engineered to be craved is a real thing. And I like to tell my clients, you know, don't beat yourself up because you really want this stuff, because it's intended. It's hyper palatable, meaning it just excites our nervous system like crazy, and it tastes really, really good to us. So it's hard not to want this food. So this diet does not support gut health, and therefore does not support brain health. So I'm going to talk about a few of the impacts on our health. Inflammation, blood sugar, and dysbiosis, which you heard yesterday, which is the microbiome. So chronic inflammation, when we look at the gut, is when the gut lining gets damaged. And when the gut lining gets damaged, as you heard, it's also believed that the blood-brain barrier becomes compromised. So let's talk just a moment about inflammation. Acute inflammation is a good thing, right? So if you get a splinter in your thumb, you want it to swell up, it gets red. What it's doing is it's keeping bad bacteria out, hopefully, and allowing internally your immune system from your white blood cells to go in and take care of whatever got injured or the alien splinter that's in there. And it tries to keep you healthy and protected. So that's a very good form of inflammation. So we want to be able to inflame. What we don't want is to stay inflamed. Chronic inflammation, meaning it can be a little inflammation or a lot, but it's consistent over time. So that's what we don't want. I love this little diagram because what it's showing is that there are all these triggers that can cause inflammation in our gut by damaging our gut lining. And to build on what was said yesterday, leaky gut is basically where the particles inside our small intestine, whether it be nutrients, neurons, toxins, you know, sugars, this is intended to smartly and wisely get into the blood system. The small intestine is only 1 cell thick. If you were to lay out your small intestine, it would cover a tennis court, which is amazing. So think about, it's very delicate, but it's very complicated. So I like to use this example where I just put my hands up, and when we talk about tight junctions, we're talking about like right here between my fingers, it's very tight, nothing can leak through. So if on my side is my blood system and on your side is the small intestine, the digestive tract, the canal, then what we want is the ability for those cells to smartly kind of grab and choose what it wants to bring into my blood system. But what happens when we bombard it with maldigested food, for one, or toxins, antibiotics, having an infection like a parasite, and sugars? And a hard one to believe is stress. High stress can cause this inflammation as well. So what happens are these cells kind of loosen up with each other. And as they loosen up, you see now there's space. And what this allows is it allows content from the small intestine that's traveling through the digestive tract to be leaked into the blood system. That's what we want to avoid. Now, all of us have a little leaky gut at times because we have stress, we don't sleep well, we ate something that disagreed with us, toxins, you know, it's just part of life. But what we don't want is to have like kind of the chronic leaky gut all the time, because what that does is it causes our immune system to hyperreact. Our immune system, every time something comes in from our gut into our blood system that is considered foreign or alien, our immune system has to take care of it. And that's what it does. And that's a good thing, once again. But if it has to do it all the time, that's when we start seeing an overactive immune system, which you may have heard about, like autoimmunity. So 70 to 80% of our immune system is in our gut. So with all this COVID activity, I've been telling people what we have to do is let's heal our gut, right? It's part of taking care of your immune system, since 70 to 80% of it resides there. And remember, when we have a compromised gut, we have a compromised brain. There is some research that was done a few years ago now that talked about the folded proteins actually coming from a compromised gut lining being able to leak out and travel up the autonomic nervous system into the brain. And that is a part of a Parkinson's issue. And as we heard yesterday, and I'm going to talk a little more about the parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve and how important that is. But that folded protein can affect our ability to function with that autonomic nervous system. So we're going to talk about how to get this gut healthy. Another thing is blood sugar. Now, why is blood sugar so important? And to chronic illness and to Parkinson's. Why? Because our brain needs fuel. Our cells need fuel. Our cells actually run using glucose or fat. But most of us are very, very used to using blood sugar as really our only source of energy. So what happens is when we have a lot of sugar in our blood, so let's just say 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of sugar is what we in our bodies try and manage. That's where we want our blood sugar to be. So that's what our organs are doing. They're managing to like 1 teaspoon. So anytime we eat something that has more than 4 grams of sugar, our insulin is, active and are trying to get the blood sugar into the cells to create energy. So if we're constantly eating sugar, then what can happen is we can get something called insulin resistance. And what that means is it's just hard for our cells to be able to take in the sugar from the blood to turn it into energy. And as that happens, our blood sugar starts to rise. And as that happens, we become more insulin resistant, which means then our brain cells are having a hard time getting the fuel that they need, okay? I look at it as a roller coaster. Now, sometimes it's not so flippy floppy, but let's just take you through the history again. Think about 400 years ago, sugar was minimally used. So this is in the last couple hundred years, right, that we are seeing a lot of sugar in our foods, and we've become very used to it, right? The more you eat, the more you want. And that 75% of foods in the supermarket have sugar in them, added sugar. So a day in the life, you wake up in the morning, your blood sugar after 10, 12 hours, whatever it's been since you've eaten anything, normally should be low, 80 to 100. We're all unique. It should be low. Then what do? We eat breakfast. So depending on what you eat for breakfast is going to be how your blood sugar starts out that day. If we eat some toast or some cereal and some juice, we're getting a lot of carbohydrates, a lot of sugars into our system, and our blood sugar is going to rise. And now as it rises and spikes higher, then we can actually manage in a calm way. It starts to drop, right? It starts to drop because we have overshot the response with our insulin. We've put out too much insulin because it rose so fast, and we keep putting it out. So now, let's say a few hours later, what happens is the blood sugar starts dropping, and because of all that insulin now continuing to get the glucose out of the bloodstream into the cells, we start dropping, and now we go too low. And now when we go too low, you're probably all very familiar with the hangry, right? We get hangry, so we get hungry and we get angry. And then because we're in that situation, we don't reach for the delicious vegetables and fish. We reach for something crunchy and carby that gives us a quick fix, which we need at that point. So you see, we just have this pattern of spiking blood sugar up and down. And what that does as well is really increase our craving response. So again, the more we do that, the more craving. Another serious effect is glycation. And I'd like to think about glycation in the kitchen is like toasting bread or searing something. It's that combination, the bonding of glucose with the protein. Now, the example of bread yesterday, I have to say the Dave's Killer Bread has an added teaspoon of sugar in their very seedy bread for each slice. And that is always the example that I use when talking to people about glycation with toast, because that's what I used to eat. And it toasts beautifully because there's so much sugar in it. It gets really nice and brown. Then if you switch to something like Ezekiel's bread, which has no added sugar, it gets hard, but it doesn't get that brown. It doesn't look as nice. It doesn't quite taste as nice because it doesn't have that added sugar. So what this means in our bodies is our hemoglobin, our blood cells, our proteins, and the sugar is the glucose. So it's that bonding kind of stickiness that happens. That's the glycation, where the sugar attaches itself to our hemoglobin. So if you've ever, your doctor has ever asked you or ordered a lab for A1C, hemoglobin A1C, that is looking at how much attachment of sugar do we have on these red blood cells. So we want to stay away from that. We want to modify and smooth out our blood sugar so we don't sit in situations where we have this high coating or glycation going on. It's hard on the vascular system. So think of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, the capillaries, the small capillaries, toes, fingers, eyes, kidney. These become damaged with the glycation and cause lots of problems, all those diabetic symptoms. So we want to avoid this. And we do that by shifting the way we eat and lifestyle. So dysbiosis, this is what the presentation yesterday was on quite a bit. It's the buildup of undesirable flora in the gut. And it really is being associated with poor brain function as well as many other disease states. So we've had inflammation in the gut, high blood sugar, and the microbiome, all three very important. I think you've seen this, and this was a large part of the talk, but I like to say that we are like a host of our microbiome. They're the leader, we're the host, because there are trillions of bacteria, fungi, yeast, and viruses in our bodies, in our gut, on our skin, everywhere. And there's so many fewer actual human cells. So we are truly a host. And we talked about antibiotics. Antibiotics, there's a couple of them out there that are very specific, that target certain bacteria, but most of them are just across the board. And don't be confused by supplements and natural antibacterial support, because it too just targets the whole bacterial connection. So, you know, I know some people will take, you know, what am I trying to say? Herbal antibiotics, thinking that it's a lot safer, but we have to be very careful with those as well. So the enteric nervous system is this second brain, and check out that book, Your Gut Has a Mind of Its Own, because it's a very fascinating read. And really the bacteria is what has been studied so far, but down the road, we're going to learn more about the viruses, the yeast, and the fungi, because they play a very important role as well. And remember, we talked about 70 to 80% of the immune system is in this gut. And this bacteria actually talks to the immune system to help it understand, to tell it how to respond to infection. So very important to have a healthy bacteria in our gut. And this is where, you know, we talked about the microbiome helps the immune system, but it also affects the central nervous system. And that's where that little picture, it shows there's a lot of communication going on between the gut and the brain, and it's bidirectional. So there is the negative impact of our diet and our lifestyle on our health and our brain, with increasing inflammation, volatile and high blood sugar, and then a compromised microbiome. So now what? What are some brain healthy choices that you can do that we have control over, right? So I'm going to go into more detail in a little bit, but this is at a high level. So I do like a Mediterranean lifestyle, and I say lifestyle because it is more than a diet. It is not just what you eat, right? It's how you eat, it's when you eat, it's who you eat with. It's if you're eating organic, if you're eating locally and seasonally. That is all the Mediterranean diet. And exercising, the other part of it, and resting. So eating a variety of nutrient-dense whole foods, that's the bottom line. So then what is that? Well, lots of colorful vegetables. And I add berries because as far as a fruit with a nutrient versus sugar impact, they are awesome. Plenty of fresh fish and seafood. Depending on where you are, that fish and seafood is different. Ferments. Remember the talk about the microbiome. Ferments are a wonderful thing to eat. Sauerkrauts, the drinks like kombucha or kefir or yogurts, which I have later. But we have to still be careful about the sugar, the remaining sugar. The idea of a ferment is that the carbohydrate is broken down and it creates all that wonderful bacteria for us. But sometimes you will get ferments where people are adding sugar back to it to make it more palatable for you, because that's what people like. So we want to stay away from that. Enjoy other fruits, but not as much as the berries. Some, you know, you can always look up glycemic load to stay away from the more high glycemic fruits. Avocados, olives, seeds, spices, wonderful. And I say properly prepared whole grains and legumes, just like Dr. Price found, is that there was some processing that went on with grains and legumes and some nuts and seeds to help them become more bioavailable, to help the nutrition become unlocked. Now, minimize refined carbohydrates. So what's that? The pastas, the breads, minimize those. Avoid or limit gluten. That's totally up to you. I say when you eat, you know, pay attention to how you feel and notice if a food is bothering you. Sometimes it's not the gluten, sometimes it's actually the wheat that bother people, especially in the US. Avoid processed foods, like we said. And, you know, we need some processed foods for convenience. So in that case, just look for the minimally processed. You know, look at the ingredient list on a label. And if it's, you know, really, really, really long and there's all these words you don't understand, that's extremely processed. But if it's reasonable, you can read it. You say, yeah, I know what that is. Then that's minimally processed. Avoid refined and added sugar. There's really no reason for it. There's no reason to use refined sugar. Sometimes to sweeten things up, we can use dates if we want, or coconut. Limit dairy, and that is specifically because of the research that came out with Parkinson's, that there is a belief that dairy increases symptoms. Now, what we don't know is if there's a difference between raw dairy or pasteurized dairy, but that is the standing right now. And I say focus on the cultured items like the yogurts instead. And then drink water. Right? Drink water as your primary fluid away from your meals. And what I mean by that is just don't drink a big glass of water with your meal, but enjoy water outside of your meal, like 30 minutes on either side. So people then ask me, well, gosh, how much should I eat of carbs, proteins, and fat? Here's a starting point. It's a guideline. 30% fat, 30% protein, and 40% carbohydrate. And we're going to go into what those look like. But it is just a guideline because we are all unique. So you start here and see how it's working for you. So some healthy sources of carbohydrates, vegetables, right? I have people that are surprised that vegetables are a carbohydrate. It is not just the grains or the beans, or, you know, the pastas and bagels. I'm picturing the old food pyramid. So healthy sources, vegetables. Eat a wide variety. I do prefer local, organic, in season as much as possible, and that is because of all the pesticides that are on them. And then in season and local, because a lot of vegetables actually, you know, they lose their antioxidants and their nutrients as they sit on the shelf. One thing I like is I will use frozen broccoli, because unless you're picking broccoli out of your own garden, it actually like uses up the vitamin C and the antioxidants kind of protect itself after it's picked. So frozen broccoli is not a bad way to go. So eat as many colors. You've heard like eat the rainbow of vegetables. So just do it that way. When you're at the grocery store and you see produce, you don't know what it is, but it's a little different color, or ask someone there, what is this and how to prepare it and try it. So fruit, we talked about that a little bit, but always in their whole form, right? No fruit juices, that's too much sugar. Properly prepared, the grains, and this is only if tolerated. You know, if you're eating legumes, let's say, or grains, and you have a lot of bloating going on, or if you have known sugar issues like type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, then minimize those grains and fruit, because they are starchier, they are sugarier, and they're going to raise blood sugar. Tubers and squash also. Higher calories because of the starch, a little more sugar, but necessary if you're active and you need those extra carbohydrates. So let's look at proteins. So poultry and eggs, again, pasteurized, pasture raised. Organic, 100% pasture raised is best. It's really hard to tell what's going on in the supermarket now with all their labels, but do your best. And they're just a powerhouse of nutrients, eggs are. So as long as, again, that you tolerate them, they can be a wonderful source of protein and fat. Nuts, seeds, and legumes, I do like to soak them or sprout them. And that is to get the best nutrition from them and not cause digestive issues. So dairy, as we talked about, if you are going to have dairy, then I prefer the grass-fed or pasture-raised milk products. And again, it changes the profile of the fat and the nutrients in the dairy, depending on what that cow is fed. but it is a source of inflammation for a lot of people. So I suggest, you know, with anybody with inflammation or digestive issues, take it out of the diet and keep it out. And then slowly after like a month, try it again a little bit and see how you feel. So meat, organic again, 100% grass-fed, pasture-raised. And this seriously changes the fat profile. Like if for eating a hamburger, for example, isn't necessarily a bad thing, but from a cow that's raised with a lot of antibiotics, steroids, and corn, it has a fat profile that's not that healthy. So it's much better if I'm going to have a hamburger, I'm going to have it grass-fed. So which means I just don't have them as often because it is more expensive and harder to find. So seafood, wild-caught fish and seafood, and preferably on the smaller side, right? Lower on the food chain because we don't want the heavy metals. And that's the, tuna is delicious. I just wouldn't eat it all the time for that reason. So that's proteins. So fats. Fats is tough because I think a lot of us have kind of a phobia about fat. But omega-3s have been in the news a lot, right? With taking fish supplements, omega-3, flax, chia supplements, because they are anti-inflammatory. So omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. Omega-6s are more inflammatory, as well as saturated fats. And this actually relates directly to a system called the prostaglandins within our body. And these systems take these fats and break it down and actually turn on and off inflammation. So omega-9, even though I have it on here so you're familiar with it, it's not really directly part of that anti-inflammatory or inflammatory system. But still, olive oil, it's very healthy for you and good for the brain. So what we want is we want to have a balance between these omega-3s and omega-6s. Now, one way that we get so many omega-6s in our diet is from processed foods. So by avoiding processed foods, we immediately reduce that omega-6 and especially the poor quality fat omega-6s and become more in balance with omega-3. So to me, that's the first thing that we do. And then we see, do we need additional sources of omega-3 because we don't eat fish or we don't like chia or flax. So you can see here the various healthy sources of omega-3. Mackerel, this is an awesome food. You can get tinned mackerel and a powerhouse. So if you are looking for something that has healthy fats, proteins, and lots of vitamins and minerals, teeny mackerel is a great way to go. And it does taste good. Omega-6, you see more in the oils and flaxseed oil, pistachio nuts, pumpkin seeds. And I want to say here that just about every nut, seed, meat, fat source is a combination. It's not just one, right? So you always have some 3 and 6 or 3, 6, and 9, or even salmon has saturated fat in it along with the polyunsaturated fats. So the 3s, the 6s are both polyunsaturated. The 9s are monounsaturated. And then you have the saturated fats. So saturated fats are best really to cook with as far as really high temperatures. The monounsaturated are fine for, the light sauteing and a lot of the cooking that we do that isn't, you don't want to sear something with an olive oil, for example, because it has a smoke point, a lower smoke point. So you don't want your fat to be in the pan smoking. So there's healthy fats, come from healthy sources. And that's the other thing I wanted to say is if you're going to cook with animal fat, for example, then you want that animal fat to come from a healthy animal. Because just like humans, animals store their toxins in their fat. And it's a way to protect the body. It's a way to protect the bloodstream, the brain from these toxins. We actually store them away in fat, and so do animals. So consider if you're going to cook with animal fat to make sure that you get the grass-fed pastured animal. And if you can't, then when you're eating those sources of meat, just eat the less fatty part of the meat. Okay, and don't forget about water. It's the most common nutritional deficiency. And older people, as we age, you know, it's like, oh, I don't want to drink water. I'm going to go to the bathroom all the time. And I know it can take a long time depending on, you know, how you're feeling, how your symptoms are. But it's very important to drink the water. Now, this guy in the picture has ice cubes. I recommend room temperature, or even a little warm. It's a lot more, it's nicer on the system, and it just helps the system function. So she had a different slide for this, but this is mine, the autonomic nervous system. And I like to also show that we have to be in the rest and digest state mostly to be able to digest our food properly. And if we are not, then what we do is we cause damage. We cause damage to our gut, and we don't get the nutrients that we're looking for. So the reason why is the autonomic nervous system with the vagus nerve. What it does is it actually talks to and controls things like gastric juices in our stomach. It controls the organs that participate in digestion. And if you think about it, like if you're in a fight or flight, meaning something is chasing you or something terrible happened and you freaked out, your digestion is not a priority. It is not engaged. The other things are, your motor skills are, the ability to get adrenaline and blood sugar into your systems, into your cells so that you can run and act. That's what's engaged. So what we want is the rest and digest state where our digestive organs are actually engaged. What's interesting is in fight or flight, you know, the throat, like for breathing, the airways are opened up, right? So you can get a lot of air. Is that something you want when you're eating? No, because you can choke. So that's a good reason to rest and digest. And I know with Parkinson's, it's more challenging because of the vagus nerve issue. So before I'm done, I'm going to tell you some things that you can really do to help get into that parasympathetic state. So there's the organ stimulating saliva, stimulating activity of the stomach. These are the things that are rest and digest. And then you see flight, freeze, inhibit saliva. That's part of fight, flight, or freeze. You don't want to eat if you don't have saliva. And then there's the relaxed airways. So we're going to quickly go through how digestion works and how it doesn't, because remember I said it's what you eat and how you eat. So a working digestion is fundamental to optimal health, right? Being mindful, being in rest and digest. So my first question to you is, where does digestion start? So say it to yourself, say it out loud. Where does it start? The brain. Did you all say the brain? A lot of people say the mouth, but really it is the brain. Think about a lemon. Just think about a really sour, juicy lemon, and you start to salivate. So you haven't actually seen or smelled or tasted anything. It's just thinking about it. So see how important that is? You have to be in the right mind, the right place to start your digestion. The mouth, we have mechanical and chemical chewing, and the saliva starts to break down our food, travels down the esophagus. Again, parasympathetic state, rest state, helps all those muscles slowly kind of pulse and move food down through our digestive tract. Into the stomach, where it's highly acidic, highly acidic. So that's the chemical component. The muscular component are the muscles that wrap around our stomach and agitate it like a washing machine does. So we need both. We need a lot of stomach acid and we need the muscle movement. So again, as we age and as we're not, you know, in as much a parasympathetic relaxed state as we should be, it's hard to get enough acid going. A lot of us think, oh, I have burping because, you know, I blow and then I have burping and I feel the acid. So I'm going to take a Tums or I'm going to do something to decrease that acid, which helps the symptom, right? It makes you feel better, but it's not helping your ability to digest. So there are things you can do here to help first relax, but there are also enzymes and stuff that we can take if needed to help digest our food properly. The pancreas releases these enzymes. Once we're done in the stomach and release it into the small intestine, or right at the top of the small intestine, the pancreas secretes digestive enzymes and takes the acidity out of it. So instead of, let's say, an acidity in the stomach, which needs to be, believe it or not, about like 1.5, which is close to battery acid, it takes it up to make it more alkaline so that it doesn't burn as it goes through the rest of our system, because the stomach is what's really protected for high levels of acidity. Now, a lot of people think that the liver actually creates or stores the bile, but it's the gallbladder that stores the gallbladder. So the liver produces it, right? And that's why, you know, there's a lot of people out there that have had their gallbladders removed, and we're told a lot of times, well, just don't eat fat. And the reason that is because the gallbladder is what holds the bile from the liver and releases it at just the right time so that it gets into that small intestine with the enzymes and all that to help digest or break up those fats, emulsify those fats that are there that you've consumed with your meal. So what happens when you don't have a gallbladder is the liver is still producing the bile. It's just not very timely. And for some people and some meals, it's more timely than others. So that's why if you don't have a gallbladder, you may say, well, sometimes I'm okay with fats and sometimes I'm not. It really just depends on that timing. And I highly suggest, if you don't have a gallbladder, look up bile salts to consider taking with a meal. And what that does is it provides that bile activity for the emulsification of the fats. Then we have the small intestine. Now, we've talked about the small intestine with leaky gut, but remember how big this thing is. This has evolved to be this long so that we can get as many nutrients out of it as possible. So part of that means that we have to do all the stuff from up north, starting with the brain first, right? Parasympathetic state, being mindful, chewing and swallowing, having enough stomach acid, having enough enzymes, having the bile, so that by the time this food glob gets into the small intestine, it can actually be broken down and have broken down into the nutrients that are available for us to get into the bloodstream. And whatever doesn't get used in the small intestine makes its way to the large intestine, where it's still used. That's where we're feeding a lot of those bacteria, right? So if we're taking in toxins and, you know, that are coming through our small intestine and now into our large intestine, those toxins are feeding bacteria, and it's not going to promote growth of healthy bacteria. So that's another part of, in our large intestine, that bacteria is making vitamins for us. We're taking in water, and then what it doesn't need, it releases into the toilet. So with constipation, because we all love to talk about poop and constipation, this whole process is very important. Fundamentally, being in that parasympathetic state allows that motility. Remember I talked about the esophagus and the motor moving stuff down? We are one tube from our mouth to the toilet. And what we really need to have is that motility, and that takes that rest and digest to be able to make that happen, along with water, right? Lots of water. Because what happens if we are dehydrated and we've got food traveling through and it gets to the large intestine and it just gets kind of hard as a rock and it's hard to pass? So water, very helpful. There's that microbiome, over 70 trillion cells that are fed by what we eat. And then we exit the waste. So how can you support digestion? We talked about this a little bit because you can spend a lot of money on food, but if you're not digesting it and absorbing it, then it's kind of a waste. So this is what we can do to get nutrients out of it, to keep our gut healthy and support our immune system. Eating is what you are doing. So that means you sit down, you're not standing at the counter, you're not driving or walking, working on the computer, multitasking. Enjoy some conversation though while you're eating with someone, family, friends. Think about where the food comes from. This is important. Remember to breathe between bites. I see people all the time, just, whether it's with the hand holding it up, but they're like forcing themselves to swallow because they're not remembering to chew. So set that fork down between bites and take a breath. And, I'm not talking about dieting here. I'm talking about just supporting your body's ability to do the right thing with what you're eating. And stop eating before you're completely full, right? Sounds simple, but here's the thing. If you're eating the highly processed, palatable foods that you can't get enough of, how easy do you think it is to stop eating? It's not. You're not even going to recognize how full you are until it's too late. So it's just really hard to have that kind of closed loop control over I'm eating, how am I feeling, when we're eating things that are craveable in a way, that are hard to stop eating. So here's some things you can do to support your digestive system. Breathing, right? Just breathing. 4 seconds in through the nose and then 6 seconds out through the mouth. Now, why do I say out through the mouth? What I want you to do is to do this with me because this helps the vagus nerve. It's kind of a yoga breath. What we want to do is when we breathe out, it's audible. You can hear it because it's vibrating. That's just one of the things we can do to help kind of tone and engage this vagus nerve. So we just breathe in for 4 seconds and then breathe out. It's very relaxing and it's toning of this vagus nerve. You can even just do this. You can rub right underneath your ear and down. It's very relaxing. Have a gratitude prayer. Whatever it is that you like to do to be thankful for how your meal came to your table. It's an opportunity to take time between the busy craziness of everything and getting food ready to actually sitting down and eating. So we're not going from one to the next. We're having time, we're taking breaths. We're engaging our parasympathetic state. We're saying a gratitude prayer, just being thankful of the nourishment that we're going to be receiving. And enjoy your meal. It really is meant to be enjoyed. And chew. Chew, 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 chew. I know. We were told, like, chew your food until it's liquid, and that just sounds absolutely disgusting. But here's the thing. Chew it until it's really easy to swallow. You shouldn't be like, gulping. And if you have to take smaller bites, take smaller bites and rest in between. It's not a race. And then, like I said earlier, limit your water with meals. Really, just enough to kind of cleanse the palate. And one of the big reasons for that, because I don't think I mentioned it, is we talked about all the acid in the stomach. Well, if you have so much water coming in, you're diluting the acidity. And as you dilute the acidity of your gastric juices, you cut the ability for them to be able to digest the foods. And protein really needs a lot of acidity to digest. So here's some supplements you can consider for digestion. Apple cider vinegar, the raw stuff. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but you can take this before your meal, like 2 tablespoons with a few ounces of water. It really just primes the digestive pump and helps like tell those, it doesn't create the gastric juices, but it kind of tells the body, hey, let's get going. The other thing you can do is if you're feeling bloating, even after you eat, this is what's really counterintuitive. Try some raw apple cider vinegar with some water. And that really helps with the acid reflux or the burping sensations that you're having. Digestive enzymes, that's I had mentioned, because as we get older, we just our pancreas doesn't pump out as much as it used to. So it's possible that digestive enzymes could be necessary with your meal. And bitters, a lot of us have heard of bitters from the past. You can also take that at the start of your meal. Also, kind of like the apple cider vinegar, it kind of kickstarts things, gets the digestive pump going. So what are some food and supplements that you can do and take to reduce inflammation? With Parkinson's, like there's a 1-2 punch I really like, which is turmeric and fish oil, because they both really work on acute and chronic inflammation, especially, if you're not getting the omega-3s, then it can be really helpful. Or even if you are getting a lot of omega-3s, but you have a lot of inflammation, then you can take fish oil to help with that, at higher doses for a while and then going to lower doses. And same with turmeric. And pre and probiotics, which was talked about by Dr. Condifer as well. Fermented vegetables are amazing. So remember the sauerkrauts, the kimchis, not just pickled vegetables. It has to be fermented, meaning that it was broken down in a way that is creating the bacteria. I eat those every day, eat them every day, like a tablespoon with each meal. There's some amazing sauerkrauts. If you're not making your own, there's amazing sauerkrauts out there, very flavorful. And this helps really feed the healthy bacteria and keeps the harmful bacteria away. And what this does is it promotes nervous system function. So it's kind of interesting that by taking taking a probiotic or eating prebiotic foods and probiotic foods, we're actually helping our brain, both brains. Now you can find a supplement, but be careful with this. Like Dr. Condifer said, you want to know what you're getting. And I also like Megaspore that she mentioned. That's one that I use frequently. So same thing with fish oil and turmeric. Don't go for the cheapest. Either talk to your provider or get in touch with me, because you want to make sure you're getting a high quality and one that works. So those are the supplements. This will be available to you, some interesting reads and articles. And then as Jen talked, like where we met is a restart class that I teach. And the next one I'm going to teach on Zoom Classroom, and it's going to start July 21st. It's a Tuesday, and it's a 90-minute class. So it would be 4 p.m. to 5:30 Pacific time. And this is a 5-week class, so it's 5 sessions. And what we do the first week is we spend the time like, why are we here? What are we going to eat and why? And preparing, how to prepare. So there's a cookbook, there's meal plans. And then we start a 21-day, call it a gentle sugar detox. And that 21 days starts the following class. So then we do 3 weeks of high nutrient dense diet with no added sugar, minimal fruit, and without all the grains and refined carbohydrates. And my participants have benefited so much from this. It really reduces chronic disease symptoms because we reduce inflammation, we balance blood sugar, mental stability, I mean, emotional stability is so much better, sleep. And then weight loss is there, but it's never the reason, it's never my go-to. Weight loss is not the goal, but weight loss is a byproduct of what happens when you start eating whole foods and start digesting better and sleeping better. So that's Restart. So you can email me, you'll have my information. And then the other thing I just want to say with that is if you're not interested in a group class, you can look on my website and schedule a free discovery session with me. And I'll just talk with you for 30 minutes to see what's going on with you. And hopefully you'll walk away with a couple tips of things you can do to improve, and we'll take it from there. So I am finished.
Wait, I have to unmute myself. I'm back. Oh. Hello. Thank you very much, Wilma. We are going to open it up to questions, and I'm going to do something a little wacky. Is if you raise your virtual hand, I'm going to let you talk. I'll unmute you for your question, and we'll just see how that goes. Please keep your questions, I guess, general in nature and specific to the nutritional topic, and we'll just see how that goes. So I'll give you a second to either raise your virtual hand or type a question into the question and answer box.
Can I start with one? Do you want me to keep this slide up?
You can change to any slide that you would like.
Okay, I didn't know if you wanted me to keep it up or take it down.
It doesn't matter. Oh yeah, you can stop sharing the screen and then it will just be the two of us. That's totally fine. And there's a lovely picture.
Oops.
There we are.
That was unintentional. I did the one thing first. So what I was going to say is I know there was a question from yesterday about what to eat for breakfast.
Oh yes, start there.
Yeah. And what I wanted to say about that was, you know, breakfast is just another meal. That's my first thought, is breakfast is breaking the fast. So the idea of having a breakfast is you want something nutritious after you haven't eaten for, let's say, 12 hours. So I like to personally have soups and stews. I think one of the things, you know, in this country, we're so used to breakfast foods that we think about toast and the yogurts and the cereals, you know, and even eggs, that everything has to be kind of a breakfasty way, but it doesn't. It really is just another meal. So I love soups and stews. I love leftovers for that reason. And another, like eggs. Eggs, if you tolerate eggs and you enjoy eggs, they are just a little powerhouse of nutrients, the fat and the protein. I love the avocado toast example, but I would not use Dave's Killer Bread because of all the added sugar. Ezekiel's is a good one. And for those that are avoiding gluten, be very careful. A lot of the gluten-free breads are very high in sugar. Yeah, and oatmeal too is good. I like to soak my oatmeal overnight. And again, if you have blood sugar issues, you know, type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, stay away from those oatmeals and go, you know, more for the eggs and the stews, something that has a little less carbohydrates first thing in the morning.
Okay, great. And speaking of breaking the fast, there was a question in here about addressing, is intermittent fasting or maybe the ketogenic diet helpful for people with Parkinson's?
So I want to say in general, yes, but everybody is unique. And I'm very cautious about people going off on their own and just starting intermittent fasting or even a keto diet. One of the reasons both of them between keto and intermittent is helpful for Parkinson's has a lot to do with the blood sugar that I was talking about, with the brain being able to get fuel. So it helps reduce things like insulin resistance It helps our cells be able to start uptaking the blood sugar that is there again to make fuel. So yes, intermittent fasting and a keto diet can be very helpful, but we have to be careful because we're all unique. So intermittent diet, my first thing is don't eat after dinner, and don't eat until breakfast, and make that at least 12 hours, and you are intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. A lot of people forget that. You don't have to do anything, crazy. Just don't eat after dinner until breakfast, and make that at least 12 hours. 13 hours is great. Then if you want to try more, take it an hour more, but start there, and start with the whole foods as well. Yeah. And the other thing I just have to say with keto diets is become such a fad. You go into the grocery store and I see people picking out boxes of stuff that say keto compliance. Like, that is not the idea of a keto diet. The idea was real food, dense nutrient food that has very few carbohydrates and a lot of fat. That was the idea, not boxed goods that are keto compliant.
Okay. I'm going to try this out. Bob has his hand raised. I'm going to click allow to talk and see if this works. Hello, Bob. Are you there?
He's muted.
Oh, wait. Unmute you. Oh, I think you have to unmute yourself. I've never tried this. So this is a new, I don't think I have the ability to unmute you. Oh, there. Bob, are you there?
I am here.
Great. What was your question for Wilma? I feel like it's a talk show.
I really didn't have a question for Wilma. I raised my hand at the beginning to say that I'm here with my 5-pound gob of bile gut or gut.
Oh.
Oh.
I brought it with me from yesterday.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing it.
I hope it's healthy.
All right. Well, let's move on to Carol then. I'm going to mute you, Bob. And let's move on to Carol, who's got her hand raised. So let's see how this works. I think you have to unmute yourself, Carol.
Okay, my question is, you said drink water. Well, what if you want to drink iced tea instead? Is that as good?
Well, I think, Carol, there's a couple of questions there. One is, if it's a caffeinated tea, then that's more of a diuretic, and it doesn't really help as much with the hydration that we're trying to accomplish with drinking water. So that's one part. So an herbal tea would be better in that case. But the ice itself is just kind of a shocker on the system. And it doesn't, one of the things like I suggested in the morning, did I suggest this? The nice, like warm,
you did.
Oh, I forgot that. Okay, but a nice tall glass of warm water with lemon first thing in the morning really helps get the digestive system going. It'll help you have a bowel movement. And it feels good after 12 hours of no hydrating, right? So the tea has that twofold component. So I would do herbal tea and switch to a warm, like the warm tea. And if not warm, then more room temperature. And it's not like you can't ever have iced tea, but water should really be the primary source of fluid. That's the best hydration source.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to mute you again. There we go. All right. So it's often hard to find wild-caught fish for a reasonable price. And she's read that farm-raised fish is very bad for us, perhaps worse than grain-fed beef. Do you recommend avoiding farm-raised at all costs, or is there some benefit to farm-raised?
Ah, boy, that's a tough question because, I want to say it all depends. I mean, did she say where she is?
I don't know where she's located.
Is there a Costco? Because Costco has, some pretty good deals on fresh fish, cod, fresh, wild-caught cod is a very reasonable price, about half the price at Costco from other stores. So that's a good option. There's several reasons, I do not like farm fresh fish. I do not trust, what they're being fed, being held in the captivity that they're in also, what kind of toxins are in them, and I don't support that. the mackerel that I talked about, I don't know if she would be interested in like the tinned mackerel, but those, you know, you can buy relatively inexpensive as well at places like Trader Joe's and Costco. And those are wild caught and so, I mean, packed full of nutrients, just really packed full of nutrients.
I always forget about the tinned fish, other than tuna, but I forget about those little tinned fish of mackerel or sardines or things like that. So those are, that's interesting.
Yeah, and somebody who's looking at like a keto diet, that's an awesome thing to have on a keto diet.
All right, Joel has raised his hand. Let's go to the lines. I do feel like a talk show host.
I know, I do too.
Long time listener, first time caller. Joel, why don't you unmute yourself?
Hi. My dad is from Puerto Rico, and I'm helping him and mom to, you know, go on this journey. And mom has two fears. One is introducing more eggs could impact his cholesterol, and another fear is that he's lightweight. I am too. We're lightweights, and then I don't know, maybe changing his diet could impact. If he tries to do any fasting, he'll lose weight, as I am too. So I'm also involved in all this because I had SIBO, so it affected my gut as well with a lot of antibiotics. So I've been also trying a lot how to combine proper your foods so you have better digestion. If you have something to expand on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. I'm glad you're there with your parents. That's wonderful. On the question about intermittent fasting is not for everybody, but like I said, just not eating from dinner to breakfast, what that does is it helps our bodies do all the natural detoxing that it needs to do, so it's not focusing on digestion. So that's something that I think we can all do. As long as blood sugar issues, of course, you know, or taking medicine can put a kink in that. But if you are like a really thin person, like you can't afford to lose weight, then you don't want to do any more intermittent fasting. I mean, that's just not recommended. And then your other question, the eggs. So there's new research out, I think in the last 5 or so years that, you know, dietary cholesterol doesn't add a lot because our bodies, as long as you function normally with your liver and cholesterol management, then our bodies make cholesterol as needed and get rid of it as needed. And so healthy, you know, eggs is not usually a problem with raising someone's cholesterol. But one thing you can do is if you're concerned about that, you know, ask your doctor, talk to your doctor and run a panel and then run a panel again in a couple months. But yeah, eggs are really a powerhouse, and especially, you know, if someone is thin, you know, they have some calories in them, which is really good because you want to get a lot of nutrients with what you're eating. And then I didn't really, I think there was a third question there about a combination of foods, like.
Oh yeah, proper combining of foods, like suggestions about that.
Yeah, so I don't know where you are with SIBO, but congratulations if you've beat that. Yeah, it's important to try and eat organic if you can. And like I talked about, just chew really well to digest the foods, be mindful, eat in a parasympathetic state, and, you know, eat nutrient dense foods. So I know a lot of people are like really big on salads because they're so healthy, but here's the thing, salads are raw vegetables are hard to digest. And if you have a compromised digestive system, it can be really difficult. So maybe what's better for a little while, especially in your situation, Joel, are some more of those root vegetables, you know, cooked root vegetables, and then broccoli and Brussels sprouts and asparagus, things that have a little more calories associated with them and that you're cooking and are easier to digest. But food combining is a science on its own. And the only one that I'm really big on are melons, like cantaloupes. Don't eat them with any other food, because cantaloupes go through you very quickly, and they will take what, other stuff with them. So it's interesting, but food combining is a whole science of its own. Yeah. I don't know if that answered Joel's question all the way.
Well, if you have follow-up questions for Wilma, I can also send them to her via email,
Okay.
so you can send them to me. So there's a couple of questions about flaxseed, sort of two things. One about putting it in water to help with constipation, softened in water, and if there is any concern with Parkinson's. And then there was another one kind of about, does testosterone levels, are those affected by flaxseed? There's I don't know if you know anything about either one of those topics with flax seeds.
Yeah, well, here's the first thing with flaxseed is don't buy it ground up. For some reason, that's how stores seem to like to sell it. They like to sell it ground, because there's a lot of the omega-3 in flaxseed, and omega-3 is a very sensitive fat, meaning it's delicate, it's fragile. And as soon as you open it up by grinding it, you start oxidizing, right? It's open to the air, to oxygen, and it starts decreasing its quality and becoming rancid. So the best thing to how to use flaxseed is to buy the whole flaxseed. It's easy to find. It's actually cheaper. And use a blade grinder, like a coffee grinder. They call them nut and seed grinder now, but it's a coffee grinder. And just grind them up and as you go. So you keep them in your freezer and just pour your tablespoon or whatever you're going to use. And yeah, putting them in water, that's a good idea for constipation, also for fiber. They're both good ideas. And then I don't know about the testosterone. Yeah. Interesting question, though. I'm going to be researching it after this call.
So Janice has raised her hand, so I'm going to go to the phone lines here. So Janice, you'll need to unmute yourself, please.
I have a question about soy. I've been told by my person in the PD group that I shouldn't have any kind of meat, except turkey seems to be sort of okay. And fish, of course, is okay. But then, soy is, I can't drink milk, which I've been all my life. So I'm drinking soy milk, and I'm wondering about just how much can you get all of your protein from soy, like tofu or tempeh or milk so the soy, I just don't know. And I tried to do organic. I wouldn't buy the other.
Yeah, great question, Janice. So, there are still different thoughts of opinion, just like I don't know if you heard Dr. Condifer yesterday saying, do all of her physician friends feel the same way about the microbiome? And they don't necessarily, because, there's always new research coming out. So if your doctor is, telling you not to eat meat other than the meat you're eating, then soy, I stay away from most soy except tempeh. And the beans, themselves, because I think it's highly processed. Like a lot of tofu is highly processed, and the soy milk, it's also highly processed, and it's hard to find without added sugars or things like the carrageenan or the guar gums. Are you eating eggs, Janice?
No, I muted her.
Oh.
I'm not sure how to unmute.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I did a few years ago, but then my cholesterol started going up because I like an egg for breakfast. I'm happy eating eggs, and I need protein in the morning. Otherwise, I sugar spike and then I crash.
Well, I would suggest, you'd have to talk to your doctor, just because your doctor probably gave you the advice about the eggs and the cholesterol. So talk to them and say, is that really a concern at this point? Because, I feel like I really enjoy eating eggs. I'm eating the pastured, egg, cage-free eggs and omega-3, eggs. And maybe that's worthwhile and not a concern at this point for the cholesterol, but that would be another good way to get the protein. And then like we were talking about, Jen and I earlier with the mackerel, things like mackerel or sardines are awesome fish to get great protein and fat. And, you know, with cholesterol, it's not so much the eggs that cause a lot of those problems. It's the poor fats that we were also eating, you know, all the crappy, the pizzas and the, you know, the margarines and the fast foods with all their toxic fats. I mean, that's what causes a lot of problems. So, you know, a nice, healthy, vibrant egg is pretty good.
So there's a question about dairy and the studies that show it negatively impacts Parkinson's. And I'll chime in on that piece. And I will send out when the slides are posted and the videos are posted, I'll also send everyone just a post-event email, and I'll include the link to the CAMCARE study, which is one of the studies that kind of says that dairy might not be so good for folks with Parkinson's, that people who are eating a lot of dairy, and I think Kelly talked about this a little bit yesterday, that they're just having worse symptoms. So I'll send that out. Any additional things that you'd want to say about dairy and Parkinson's in particular, Wilma?
Well, I would say that regardless of the study, even, dairy can be inflammatory for a lot of people for two reasons. One, people have a sensitivity to the protein of dairy, and some people are lactose intolerant to the sugar in dairy. So it can be one or the other, but anytime someone comes to me with like an irritable bowel issue or, you know, like digestive upset, sinus, you know, stuffiness in the head, like asthma, getting rid of dairy is one of the first things that I recommend. So yeah, I like to like limit dairy and focus on the cultured items for dairy.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask a few more of these questions, and then if you have additional questions that you want answered, then you can email them to me and I can get them out to Wilma, and she's, you know, you can also email her. I'll give you her contact information. Coconut oil good for your brain? Any quick response to that? Because coconut oil is definitely one of those things.
Yeah, coconut oil is a big fad right now, isn't it? No, it is good. It is good for the brain. And one of the reasons why is because the fat is very good in the sense that it's not going to spike your blood sugar. That's one of the reasons. So it's a good fuel for your body and your brain. Now, people talk about their concern over cholesterol. Coconut really does raise LDL cholesterol. Now, depending on who you are, that is not an issue. I have clients, I've seen blood panels beforehand and afterhand where they've gone all coconut crazy and their cholesterol is better than ever. It just depends on your body and your metabolism. So again, like with any diet, like I think Joel was saying, so you don't want to just go crazy with the diet and change a bunch of foods, either not working with somebody or not really closely monitoring how your body's responding, you know, how you're feeling about it.
Okay, great. Turmeric and damage to the liver. Have you heard that?
I have not heard turmeric damaging the liver. Sometimes it's with other things, but, you know, other binders.
Mm-hmm. Do you always have to take turmeric with black pepper? I've heard that.
Yeah, that is an interesting, yeah, it has to, so it doesn't have to be black pepper. There are other things that you can bind it with so that it is assimilated properly within the body. Like my favorite turmeric comes from Standard Process. But you certainly, if you're getting like the supplement at, you know, at the store, it's typically going to have black pepper is better. Same thing when you're cooking with it. You know, if you're doing the curry or something and you're using fresh turmeric, you want some black pepper. But I think even more importantly is that just like all supplements, I think Dr. Condifer was saying, they're not regulated the same. So you have to really know where you're getting it and trust them, because you can be taking, 1,000 milligrams of turmeric, but what is really in your bloodstream? What is helping with inflammation?
What would you suggest a good resource for figuring out what supplement is a good supplement and what is not? Because there's so many. I mean, is there a go-to or is there not? Because I hear that all the time. You got to be careful, but where do you go?
You go to your nutritionist or your doctor.
Okay.
I'm serious, because we work with supplement providers. I mean, you have your favorites that you trust, and you stay on top of their processes, and, also work with colleagues to know who's changing what, like fish oil, for example. You can have a really great fish oil, and then next thing you know, they've changed their processes and how they're manufacturing it and introducing heat into the system, which degrades the oil. So I wish there were one, but they all have advertisers behind them. So it's really hard to trust. And don't buy your supplements on Amazon.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of fake stuff on Amazon. That's
yeah. Speaking of heat, did you have a pros and cons of raw versus cooked vegetables?
Well, I covered that a little bit with, I think we need some of both. Okay. And if you're someone that's having like digestive upset when you eat raw vegetables, then I would cook them for a while. Raw vegetables do require a little more digestive support, and that's why. So you have to really chew them well and eat them slowly. But I like a combination of both. Now, when it comes to prebiotics, we talked about prebiotics being food that you can consume that actually feed the bacteria, the good bacteria, things like jicama and onion and asparagus. Those things, if eating, raw amounts of raw, help with that prebiotic. If you cook it, they don't have the same benefit. On the other hand, spinach, for example, spinach, you don't really get the nutrients out of unless it has like some kind of acid associated with it or cooking.
Okay.
Which is why spinach salad is good.
Yeah. So 2 more questions and then we will wrap this up. So opinion on nutritional value of a smoothie with protein powders?
What a great question. Smoothies, let me say the first thing about smoothies is you want to eat them like you would anything else. A lot of times people turn to smoothies is because they think, I'm in a hurry, I'm just going to grab a smoothie and go. And that is a lot to throw onto your stomach. So you want to preferably eat a smoothie with a spoon, or sip it because you want it to get in your mouth with the saliva so it can start breaking down, or it's like a big bomb on the gut. A straw is a terrible thing with a smoothie. And then protein powder can be good depending on where your protein powder is from. Look on that same site. What is it? The Detox.org?
Detox Project.
Yeah. They have a whole list of all the toxins in various protein powders as well. So very fascinating. So you just want to be careful that your protein powder is also like a single protein, whether it's pea, rice, or whey, that it's not like a meal replacement. It doesn't have a whole bunch of other stuff added to it. And then lastly, such a great question with smoothies, is you don't want to just throw in a bunch of fruit. Right? Like people say, oh yeah, I have a smoothie. It's a banana and some berries and an apple. It's like, well, that's a lot of sugar in a smoothie. So, you want to make sure to have the protein and some greens, greens and avocado. So avocado in a smoothie is awesome. It makes it very creamy.
Great. Great. All right. Last question, I think. Would it be better to eat plant-based butter versus regular butter, especially for someone with Parkinson's, since regular butter comes from dairy?
Yeah, no, I am not a fan of this plant-based butter because it takes a lot of processing to turn a plant into butter. And if you look at the ingredients, I'm not a fan of the fats that are used or the processing that has to go on. So I'm not a fan of this. I mean, I love plant-based diets, but when I say plant-based diet, what I mean is that we eat mostly like whole food vegetables, you know, and when we have grains, that they're properly prepared and so forth. It's not that we start consuming processed foods that are trying to mimic other foods made out of plants. If you're gonna, my position is eating plants, eat plants. There's vegetables, not processed vegetables into something that tastes like a meat or tastes like a butter. So to stay away from dairy, I mean, it's not that much, it's not that big a deal. And with butter, I mean, I don't know how much butter you're using, but you can use ghee. And ghee is basically, you know, butter that has had the milk solids removed from it. So it's not guaranteed to have all milk solids, but you know, unless you have a significant allergy to it, it's good enough. And it's delicious.
I feel like it's the new health food. It's the new olive oil is ghee. I keep hearing more and more. So
yeah, I actually like combining a little bit of ghee with olive oil. It just gives a lovely flavor, you know, whether you're cooking eggs or whatever.
Yeah, I do that too, actually. So I've learned a lot from Wilma over the years, and I could predict some of her answers, which is actually scary, but good. Anyway, so we are going to wrap it up for today. I hope you guys all found this informative. We will have the videos posted next week on YouTube, and I will send out a post-event email early next week that will have some information in it, including links to those videos and the slides and contact information and all that kind of business. Our next Take Control program will be August 14th. And in some ways, unintentionally, it kind of goes along with this whole topic that we've been talking about. It's called Mind Over Parkinson's. And it's a presentation kind of discussing the benefits of exercising your mind to improve positive thinking, stress control, and optimism, getting into that parasympathetic nervous system state. So that will be happening August 14th. And then in September, we're going to bring back Dr. Pravin Kamani, who spoke in May about pain in Parkinson's. And this time he's going to talk about case studies. So he's going to present a couple case studies in Parkinson's disease that really dictate what kind of treatment, because Parkinson's affects everybody a little differently. So that'll be unique and different. And then I'm working on the rest of the stuff for the rest of the year, because we will do this program monthly. And speaking of which, when you exit this program, you're going to see a link to a survey. And if you, it's really short survey. If you take a moment to fill that out, let us know what you thought of the program. And also it gives you an opportunity to suggest other topics that might be of interest to you as an audience. So that's all for me today. And I thank you, Wilma, very much for all of your insights. And I thank those of you who joined us. And feel free to reach out to us at APDA. Oh, our email is apdanw@apdaparkinson.org. And you can send us any questions that you have, and it's also in the chat right now. So thank you all very much. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. The sun is coming out here in the Northwest, and I hope those of you who are not in the Northwest are not suffering from a heat wave. So everyone take care, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.